Would you ask Miss Redmond to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Miss Redmond, ready to carry on?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Williams.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Redmond, before we go back to where we were going, which was the 16th of June, can I just take a slightly sideways look at your evidence and look back at your training? Can you clarify for us, please, whether your lack of contingency management training during your interim role was to do with where you were placed or your agency statement, or whether you found that other permanent senior staff you were working with during your first week were equally untrained in contingency management?
My lack of training was because I guess I was an interim. I hadn't been trained in any of my interim posts either.
Did you ever establish whether colleagues at RBKC, say colleagues, those occupying similar positions to you in adult services in RBKC, for example, Stella Bailey, or in CSS, Children's Social Services, had more training with you than you on contingency management?
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that. From your experience in other councils, does the lack of your own training, and so far as you could see, possibly the lack of others' training for permanent senior staff, surprise you?
I think it's one of the lessons I would like to put down, that there isn't lack of training. There is training. Different authorities have different levels of training, but I've been in quite a lot of authorities at the senior level, and the training one gets, if you just see gold, bronze and silver, it does not. There wasn't any training on a halo. There wasn't any training on the depth and breadth of the humanitarian assistance group. It does not give people the experience to deal with what happened here.
Right.
And certainly in terms of the Director of Adult Social Services being in that halo role, I'm not quite sure why, but also if you're doing that, you need to be absolutely really trained in that, and I've never had that.
Right. Let's turn then to the 16th of June 2017 and the Gold meeting on that morning at 10 a.m, which you tell us in your statement you attended. And we go back, we've covered that. Then let's move on then to the next meeting, chronologically, 2 hours later at noon, which was the second Humanitarian Assistance Steering Group on that date. Now, let's go to RBK 402040, please. And you can see the document we looked at earlier, and we studied item 3 here, clarify with RBKC Gold. Just looking down at page 7, we can see the attendees. And looking down the list, do you agree that it remained the position at this point, noon on the 16th, that the only voluntary and community organisation present was Cruse Bereavement Care?
I'm looking at the list, and there's Victim Support there and British Red Cross.
Okay.
And the Archdeacon was representing the faith sectors, part of the faith sector.
Thank you. So British Red Cross is picking those out. Was there because there was a pre-existing protocol, or at least one that had expired but was still being acted upon, between RBKC and the BRC. Did you know that?
Yes.
Yes. So then the Archdeacon of Middlesex, do you know how he came to be at this meeting?
Yes. I asked Tony Redpath to identify voluntary sector people plus faith group sector as someone who could represent and join the meetings from the faith groups. And I think as the Archdeacon was mentioned as possibly representing a portion of the faith groups to come to this meeting at that short notice.
And which portion was that?
Well, he wasn't representing the whole. Well, I think I was told he was representing the faith sector.
Right. But apart from them, it's right. It looks as if it's right that other than those perhaps three, at most generous, three entities or people, voluntary and community organisations remained uninvited or overlooked. Is that the case?
I think the purpose of inviting the voluntary sector representatives rather than a lot of voluntary sector, because this meeting was huge, but I do think someone who was representing the voluntary sector, or Tony, should have spoken, should have come knowing what was happening in the voluntary sector communities out there then.
Right. Do you know what happened or what had happened by way of attempts made by RBKC to get voluntary and faith sectors to attend?
No, I just left it to them.
If we go to page 2 of this document, we can see that the topic of communication is raised here at page 2. And if you look at item 11 there, you can see that there are some suggestions, and it says collate all information on helplines, services, rest centres, etc., and publish to the public via comms channels and gov.uk/RBKC website to produce leaflet versions and provide to all frontline services dealing with those affected by the incident to consider language barriers, alternative languages, distribution via community/faith networks. Now, how, at that stage, how advanced were the communications from RBKC to those affected, perhaps through these channels? Do you know?
Well, I know they weren't very effective because I saw what was happening on the television. They weren't effective. But this was now getting all that information, saying this needs to be done now, and getting someone to take that action. Right.
Were you disappointed that it hadn't been done before? Or was it your expectation that it should have been done before this time? This is now more than 48 hours after the fire.
I think a lot of the things that came to this group should have been done before.
Right. Does that include improving comms or getting communication conduits like this in place?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if we turn, please, to page 6 of this same set of minutes, we can see there is under the heading Health and Wellbeing subgroup, item 7. Look at 7.2. It says the group discussed the need to look at making information available in different languages, signposting people looking for their loved ones away from hospitals, safeguarding for stranded children, and the coordination of volunteers. Whose suggestion was that? Or at whose prompting did that discussion take place? Was it yours?
Yes, we were we wanted people to raise the issues that they had found from their first subgroup, and the things that they were raising from their subgroup were these issues.
What provision had been made at that stage for providing information to those whose English was not their first language?
I don't personally know.
Do you know what support was provided at the Westway for that category of people, including the provision of interpreters?
I don't know.
Was there an awareness that this part of RBKC was ethnically diverse and that English wasn't a first language for potentially very many numbers of people?
I would have thought there was.
Yes. Right, you would have thought there was, but were you aware that this was something in people's minds?
I can't recall whether something was mentioned earlier on about interpreters, but certainly I wasn't. I don't know. This was just raised at my meeting.
And do you know what had prompted the suggestion for signposting people looking for loved ones away from hospitals? What had prompted that?
I think that's because people were looking for information to see if their loved ones were in hospital or where they were. I think that's what that relates to.
Right. What would that involve, signposting them away from hospitals?
They were raising the things they needed to do next, and I guess we didn't have this was a much more tactical meeting, so they were saying these are the things they discussed in their subgroup and these are things they were going to address. I'm hoping and I think some of the conversations were putting social workers in there, getting people to go and meet people at hospitals so they could actually talk to them.
And had this concern, what was the root of this concern, do you know?
I can't can't recall, but I think it was people were very distressed looking for their loved ones, and maybe the hospital wasn't the right place, and they should go to the Family and Friends Centre or they should go somewhere else.
Why was that still happening more than 48 hours after the incident?
I'm speculating that those are the places weren't giving them the information they needed.
But why were they still going to hospitals looking for loved ones
I can't
more than
answer.
48 hours after the incident? You can't help us with that. Was that a question mark? Was that a topic examined at this meeting?
This was the feedback from the chair of the subgroup had met the day before, saying the things they were looking at, and that was one of the things they were looking at,
Right.
and they were going to try and address that. The whole group then didn't go into a lot of discussion about all these things. It was a feedback from them about the things they were looking at and what they were dealing with next.
I see. So there was no examination of the reasons why it was that still 48 hours after the incident, families were still drifting around London hospitals trying to find news of their loved ones.
There might have been, I don't recall it, but there certainly would have been at that subgroup meeting. They would have looked at why.
Right. Now let's again go to the meeting on the 20th of June, 4 days later. RBK 401014. Now, as I say, this is the 20th of June, so we're now on the Monday, Tuesday, I think, in fact, after the fire. Sue Redmond, it's item 46, Sue Redmond, Housing and Temple Accommodation Subgroup, Sue Redmond to work with comms on a resource directory and a simple message and FAQs document to give to all affected individuals. Deadline to get this out to those workers on the front line by 1500 today, 20th June. Was it the case that by Tuesday, 20th of June, a leaflet or FAQ document has still not yet been produced for those affected by the fire?
I can't remember whether anything did happen, but obviously I needed to do something better, produce something better. So
And this was, of course, this was after the LLAG had been activated on the Friday, the 16th of June in the afternoon. Did you get any help from, or any oversight or any input from LLAG in relation to working on comms to improve it in the manner identified here?
Before this time or after this?
Before this time.
Action.
Before this time, between the 16th and the 20th.
I didn't have this as an action point for me personally. After the 16th, LLAG took over, and it was a totally different structure that was created.
Can you explain why there was a delay in producing a leaflet?
Well, certainly it was on our agenda when we had our 16th HASG meeting in RBKC. It was one of the actions that the subgroups were going to take forward. After that, there was a different structure kicked in, and I don't know why that action didn't take place. Maybe the structure had changed, or it had been lost in the transitions. I can't answer.
You can't answer. And let's just try this. Let's go to RBK 30148535. Now, this is what I'm showing you here is a document circulated on the 20th of June, 2017, by the Grenfell Tower Victims Unit, which was prepared by central government, MHCLG. We know that from GOL 50611, which I don't need to show you. It is a Grenfell Tower Victims Unit guidance document. And it says, the unit, in the second paragraph, the unit will act as a single point of access into government for those affected by the Grenfell Tower fire and will coordinate government support services on issues such as benefits, immigration, transport, education and health. This is in addition to the support services available at the Community Assistance Centre. We are not an advice line for victims, which is provided by the British Red Cross and then there's a number. However, we can help to resolve any questions and problems that support workers, social workers, family liaison officers, housing officers, etc., are encountering on behalf of victims. Was this a document you saw at the time?
I probably did.
You probably did. Did RBKC produce any document for victims in this same way after the 20th of June?
This work comes out of the LLAG group that was then assembled. So we were all doing tasks to feed into this. Not RBKC; they weren't involved really. It was the rest of us now who were in this the next phase. I don't think RBKC did anything, but I can't remember.
Right.
This organisation, this document was published with all the input that we were all doing over those days to gather all this information, put it all together. When I say we, I mean the people who'd been moved to Westminster to carry on with the longer-term planning.
Right. Did RBKC, though, produce anything of their own independently of this document for victims?
I don't know.
Right. Now, in your first statement at page 13, if we can go to that, please, paragraph 61, you say, I wrote a number of emails before my visit to number 10. I was a lead person with the members and reported to them and had to provide them with support. Councillor Mary Wheel was distraught on the Friday at the lack of communications coming out of RBKC, with members not being told what was going on and the whole situation becoming increasingly negative towards RBKC. I produced a copy of an email that I sent her as Exhibit SR29, in which I mentioned the need for support. What I meant by this is that she was not being supported by RBKC comms. I mentioned that this could have serious implications, and by that I meant I thought the council would be taken over. What we need from that then is the email. RBK30 is 20903. And here is an email from you to Councillor Wheel on the 17th of June 2017. So this is now the Saturday, very early in the morning, I think 12 minutes past midnight. Do you see that?
Yes.
Subject, hello. Dear Councillor Wheel, apologies for not ringing earlier. And then you say, I so know you. I'm not quite sure how to read that. I know you and other councillors want to have clear actions, etc., and want to talk to people as you are real community leaders. To be very honest, you need a lot more support in that area that hasn't been happening. And what was that a reference to?
I saw Councillor Wheel in RBKC before we were all had to move out, and I met her. She was very upset, and she said her and some of the councillors, they had met people. They wanted to call a community meeting. Could I speak to someone, because they're not hearing anything that's happening? Could I speak to people in RBKC and perhaps arrange something for them so they could meet with people in the community?
Right. And at the foot of the email, you say, there are serious implications in all this. Not that any other council could have done better as it's so huge, but because I fear there will be the need to make a statement, if you understand. Now, in your statement, you say that there you meant you thought the council would be taken over. But in relation to that, when did you first fear or think that the council would be taken over?
I suppose when I meant the council would be taken over, it's not so much that Gold would come in and take over the operations and the support, because I thought that was quite right. I meant that some people in the council would go.
I see. Were your serious implications that you were averting to here in this email something that was discussed among RBKC's senior leadership?
Oh, no, no, not at all. It was other people talking about RBKC. Right,
I see. Now, going back in time to the 16th of June 2017, if we can look back at the minutes of the noon HASG meeting on that day, those are at RBK 402040. Let's look at page 2, please. Action 14 at the foot of page 2. Chair. You see it says, Chair, clarify with RBKC Gold responsibility for coordination of volunteers. Noted should not be a responsibility of BRC due to other priority work they are leading / supporting. Why did that need to be clarified?
Again, I think this is because the British Red Cross felt they were doing things they shouldn't be doing, and it was a council's responsibility.
Right. Who had fed that back to this meeting?
Unless it's later on, I'm assuming it's someone from British Red Cross.
Right. And did the meeting agree with those concerns that the BRC was overreaching itself?
No, it wasn't that sort of meeting. It was just they were feeding back that they didn't think they should be doing that. No one at the meeting argued with that. It was just a sense that they should not be doing this, and the council should be dealing with volunteers.
Right. And do we take it from that it was the BRC who had been coordinating volunteers up to that point?
I know, I don't know whether it came after this or before this, that the BEC was given responsibility for coordinating volunteers, but I don't know whether they were doing it appropriately or they were doing it properly.
Right.
And I think BRC, British Red Cross, were getting lots of phone calls and offers of support, I think.
Right. Now, I want then to turn to the activation of the LLAG and the handover of the HALO role. If we go back to your first statement, please, page 10, paragraph 47. You say there, and I'm summarising, that you, on the afternoon of the 16th of June, you left the town hall and you went to the Westminster City Council offices because of the protest at the town hall. And I think it's right, isn't it, that by this stage London Local Authority Gold had been activated in the sense that the handover had been completed. Is that right?
I found out that when I got to Westminster, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in paragraph 48, you say, I remember when I got to Westminster, a number of rooms had been set up and subgroups were already up and running. There were numerous other chief executives in attendance and a lot of tasks were being carried out. I did ask why London Gold did not help from day one and was told that they had to be invited in to help by the council. I thought that in these circumstances this protocol needed to be changed. To whom did you speak about that on that day?
I think I asked, I don't know who, I may have asked Mark Sawyer why they didn't come in, and he said they had to be invited.
Right.
And then I had the thought that these circumstances needed to be changes, and I then followed up that thought with an email.
Yes. What was it about this incident that led you to think that the protocol needed to be changed?
I couldn't believe that something this big, and people were watching it for days, and there were experts in community planning, absolute experts in London who could come in and support, and that they had to be asked to come in. And if they weren't asked, I just thought there should be some protocol that said there has to be a different way of working this.
Let's go to page 14 of your statement, paragraph 69, just to round that off. You say, it was clear that the scale of the disaster and the immediate need for leadership and direction and coordination was much greater than RBKC could respond to as expected by people. I think members and some staff were on the scene very quickly but did not take the lead. In my view, at the very earliest of the stages, a gold London-wide team should have been set up, experts sent in, and coordination, advice and support given to the council. Can you clarify for us whether those are your views now in hindsight, or whether those were views you held at the time in the midst of the response?
I still hold them now.
Yes, but did you hold them then?
Oh, I did.
You did, right. And can you help us? What difference would it have made to the response had a gold London-wide team been set up at the outset at, say, 6 a.m. on the 14th of June?
Well, not only would you have had more people, but you would have had experts who are trained, and communications would have been, and also my view of what happened when I got to Westminster was, or even just my very short meeting with Mark Sawyer, I asked him for something and the next minute it was there. Right. They had resources to their fingertips like this. They were command and control, they were doing things.
Things that is this right, you didn't observe happening at the BEC?
It wasn't just the BEC, it was a whole range of things they were doing. The BEC was one small, there was lots of groups doing things and acting on them, and experts saying, this is what we need to get this person in, bring that person in, do this. It was very coordinated.
Right. Now, when you attended Westminster City Council offices on the evening of the 16th, because that's where we are now, the Friday evening, what happened to your role as HALO?
I don't know exactly how it happened, but I think there were a number of chief execs already there who had experience of being HALOs, and they took on that role, and then I became support to them. I think that's how it happened.
Right. And what was the status of the response at this point of handover to London Gold? Where had it got up to?
Sorry.
Well, let me see if I can get it much more specifically. Can we go to an email at GOL401303? This is an email that you sent to Mark Sawyer on the morning of the 18th of June. That's the Sunday at 11:05. If you go down, please, to the foot of page 1 and over to page 2. To be clear, you're sending this email to John Baradell and Julia Corkey, as well as Charlie Parker at WCC. You misspell John Baradell's name, so he doesn't get it, but it doesn't matter. What then happens is Mark Sawyer corrects it and sends it on to him. But looking at the text of your email at the bottom of page 1, you say, "Dear John and Co," and then over to the top of page 2, "I have no idea of the protocol, or if you will even read this from me, because the amazing support and structure is kicking in and we are now in a different world. And believe me, I appreciate that and I'm learning so much. However, I have to share with you some thinking if I am to be able to hold my head up after all this. I can absolutely appreciate the political issues. However, there are lots of learning from previous incidents, not least the issues of scapegoats, whether individuals or organisations. There are hundreds of staff still going to work tomorrow in our BKC, and they may be feeling demoralised following the impact of political attacks. They need to know they aren't crap, are valued and continue to have something significant to contribute, and they need to feel the organisation is still okay. And so without beating about the bush, our BKC will need to continue and do their job with residents, and whatever people feel about that, we have a responsibility to make sure the council is working well and have a good team leading it who have the explicit confidence of everyone and are not undermined. So deal with what you need to and let the rest of our BKC get on with the vital work they do. And let's agree who can do that and help them do that, rather than watching them fail and then going in. It's not going to help residents if the whole organisation folds. So there needs to be a plan for that instead of a whole-scale attack. And for the future, maybe a lesson learned is that you don't wait. London Gold for a council to ask you, but in a major incident like this, where the council itself may be traumatised, you just step in. 3 exclamation marks. So we are all responsible, aren't we? Sue. Now, can you just tell us why you felt you needed to write this email to John Baradell on the morning of Sunday, the 18th of June?
From the Friday, just some of us went to Westminster. One of them was Nicholas Holgate, and one of them was me, and I think Tony Redpath, out of RBKC. I don't know why, it was just the few of us. And from then through to the Sunday, I saw how, I don't know what the word is, how marginalised they were in this whole new structure. I had emails from managers in RBKC saying their staff were feeling terrible about the way the evacuation of the building had gone. They were feeling frightened about going to work. They felt the whole council, because of the press, they felt the whole council was rubbish and they were feeling awful. I also picked up lots of stuff on the Friday night and the Saturday and some of the Sunday from people across, professionals across London who were working, about how they thought RBKC had not handled this and how bad they were. And I had some experience in adult social care and in social care of organisations that have had deaths, and as a consequence, some people have been scapegoated, and it's taken years for the organisation to recruit staff again and to get staff moving. And in that moment, in that immediate time, they were feeling terrible. The services weren't operating. It was falling apart. So I felt a bitter sense of injustice about every single criticism that was I didn't know RBKC really. Every sense of injustice that was put in their direction. I felt angry that people had watched it for 2 days and I didn't understand why. And I just wanted him to actually make a decision. about are you going to support these leaders in RBKC to get on with their job, or are you not? And you can't let it gradually go on.
And when you say in the last sentence of the fourth paragraph from the end there, let's agree who can do that and help them do that rather than watching them fail and then going in. Did you think the council had failed before London Gold was activated?
Yes.
You did. Now, your observation at the end was, or included, that the council itself may be traumatised. What led you to think that that might be the case?
I saw some people who patently weren't functioning properly. It was people weren't operating the way they should have been. People were very upset. Leadership people were very upset and not functioning.
Let's then turn to the 17th of June 2017, which I know chronologically is the day before this email, but in the events, this is what comes next. We know, and correct me if we're wrong about this, but the role of Halo was in fact passed over to Mary Hartley. Is that right?
Yes.
And she at the time was the chief executive of Hounslow Council, yes?
Yes.
And you say you were instructed to support Mary Hartley. Did you see any difference in the response while supporting Mary Hartley?
Everything was very different. We're in this huge floor of Westminster Council. There was a central hub. There were different offices for every single area that were operating in it. In those offices, there were people to take notes. There were people who were information officers. There were people who would be runners. There were lots of staff working to them. There was a huge coordination where, in terms of the Halo, she had a short meeting with John Barradell and a few people. She came out with a few actions she had to do. She came in to us, gave us our instructions. It was very organised and very smooth and very resourced.
Right. Did you get the impression that Mary Hartley had knowledge and expertise of how to run a major incident as a council leader under the Pan-London arrangements?
Yes, I think I did.
Did you ask yourself at the time the question, well, let me try it this way. Did you make a comparison in your own mind between Mary Hartley and her activities and approach and that of Nicholas Holgate?
No, I didn't make that comparison. And there was a huge infrastructure there, absolutely huge infrastructure around her.
Right. So just to be clear, you don't, is this right? You don't attribute Mary Hartley's response to perhaps better expertise and training in the matter of civil contingencies than that which Nicholas Holgate had?
I don't really have I don't feel comfortable. I can't really say that. She was doing a humanitarian assistance liaison role, which was one aspect of the civil contingency, and she was doing that in this huge infrastructure. I'm sure she was very well trained.
Right. Do you know what training she had to adopt the Halo role?
No.
You don't? Let's look at her statement. GOL 401114. This is her second witness statement to the inquiry. And if we go in that, please, to page 2, paragraph 3, she says, my initial assessment on arriving was that the RBKC team, working with partners, had tried to cover all the key strands of humanitarian assistance, but that they had not managed to demonstrate enough progress in any of these areas on the ground to provide confidence to survivors and observers that the right work was being done. And pausing there, I think, do you agree that RBKC had not made enough progress yet in covering all the key strands of humanitarian assistance before the 17th of June?
Yes.
Yes. And she continues, coming into the team, it was clear that some of the things which really needed to be in place were not. These included a single definitive list of the hotels into which surviving families and individuals had been placed, with basic contact information, a process for communicating regularly with these families and individuals which should have been underway already, a clear understanding of which families and individuals had the greatest needs, notwithstanding the terrible situation everyone was in, and a list of key community, faith and other leaders with whom I would have expected the RBKC to have been engaging already. I've said in my original witness statement that there was little to no handover from the RBKC team, which made it difficult to know at the start whether these things did already exist or not. We could not find them, so had to assume they did not. I've read that all to you. In relation to her list of things that were missing, do you consider that her list is a fair summary?
Yes.
If we go back to her first statement, GOL 50441, if I can show you page 4, paragraph 13, she says this. By the time help was accepted, the RBKC team were exhausted and not in a position to provide any meaningful handover to the LLAG team coming in to support them. Consequently, the LLAG team had to spend quite a lot of time assessing the situation and trying to establish, for example, contact information for families dispersed in hotels or who were the key leaders and contacts in the local community with whom we should engage. Do you agree with that observation?
Yes, I do. And she's not counting me as the RBKC team at this point, but yes, I do.
Let's then turn to the meeting at Downing Street on the 17th of June. In your first statement, if we go to that, please, page 11, you cover this at paragraph 53, and you say, in the midst of all that was happening during the day, I was informed by Westminster Comms that I was required to attend at number 10 Downing Street on the 17th for a meeting with some of the residents and the Prime Minister to provide an update on behalf of RBKC. Now, in your contact with Lorna Grattan, who was an aide to the Prime Minister, she sent an email, and let's look at that. That's at RBK 3020896. I think you actually spoke to her to understand what it was that you needed to do at the meeting, yes?
Yes.
And she follows that up with this email on the Friday, the 16th, before the Saturday, the 17th meeting. And this is timed at 11:12 in the morning, as you can see. And she says to you, Sue, thanks for speaking to me earlier, for agreeing to attend the meeting at Downing Street tomorrow. And then if you go to the fourth paragraph down, it says, or she says this, as discussed, the PM will mostly be listening to the concerns of the residents and volunteers. She may turn to you for help with some of the questions they ask. You certainly won't be expected to know all of the answers, but listening to concerns and hopefully acting on them subsequently will go a long way. As discussed, many of the residents were frustrated by a perceived lack of information and coordination from the council. However, they're very polite in the meeting today, and I would expect the tone tomorrow to be similar, though they may be even better prepared with questions and examples. Now, in relation to what she says there about the residents being frustrated by a perceived lack of information and coordination from the council, did you agree at the time, from what you had observed up to that point, that that was a justified complaint?
Yes.
Now, ahead of the meeting in Downing Street, you, I think, forwarded this email to Nicholas Holgate. Let's look at that. RBK 3049583. This is at the foot of page 1 and over to page 2. You email him, subject, meeting tomorrow at Downing Street on Grenfell Towers. Dear Nicholas, and then over to top of page 2. I hope you're okay. And just pausing there, that's it's a self-explanatory sentiment. Was it prompted by any observation on your part that he was very far from okay?
I don't know how very far from okay, but it was. We left when we left RBKC and we all made our own way to Westminster. I just observed he was just left there, basically, sitting there. And it was, yeah.
And then you go on. I thought I would share with you what I've just had from number 10. I've also shared with Tony and Councillor Wheel, as she was wanting to meet groups tomorrow and me be there, so wanted to let her know why I couldn't. I'm not sure this is the time to talk about how I feel, and I'm not even sure I should go to tomorrow's meeting, but if there's anything you want to advise or you want to steer, I'd be very grateful. What did you mean by, I'm not sure this is the time to talk about how I feel?
Well, I absolutely did not think I was a person to go to that meeting.
Right. And you say in your statement, I think, in this regard, that you were not totally familiar with the way RBKC operated or the key personnel involved. Do you consider that, or did you consider at the time, that lack of familiarity hindered your ability as Halo to coordinate the response in any way?
I do think it did. I also think by the time the Halo role was there was so much coming at that Halo, no one person could have done it. I do think that.
Right. I mean, was it your view at the time that a Halo would have been better appointed from within RBKC, as opposed to under the tri-borough arrangements, which could have involved anyone from Hammersmith and Fulham or Westminster?
Well, I was there as a tri-borough person, so there could have been anyone, but it could have been another director, either in RBKC or another tri-borough director, absolutely.
Yes, I mean, but trying it a different way, were you concerned at the time that you were being sent in to bat for RBKC when it wasn't your borough, and its shortcomings, whatever they were, or whatever you saw of them, were not your responsibility?
It was maybe a bit of that, in that I didn't know RBKC. It wasn't my borough, but neither. I mean, I'd only been there 2 months for the three of them, so I wasn't any more or less involved. Well, I was less involved with RBKC than the rest. But it was that if you're going to meet people after what they'd been through, to have someone who could say, I've only been there, I mean, I wouldn't have said it, but this person's only been there 2 months, who didn't know the voluntary sector colleagues, who didn't know all the people in the room. I don't mean the individuals necessarily, but didn't know Grenfell, didn't know. That wasn't going to me, to be an empathetic and the right response, the right person. I mean, obviously, they said to me, you can show empathy, you can talk to people. That's why they asked me to do it. But I didn't know the area. I didn't know the community. I would have wanted someone who knew those people to go there and really, really listen and really take something back. I mean, I could do that on one level, but not really. I didn't think I was the right person.
And did you make clear to Nicholas Holgate what you just made clear to us?
No, this is like 12 o'clock at night, isn't it? And I was going there the next morning.
Yes.
So I just said, that's why I said, I'm not sure it's time to how I feel. But I couldn't write all that in an email. I was going, I was doing what I was being requested to do. And that's why I said, I'm not sure I'm the right person to go. I made those feelings known to Westminster Comms, who were asking me to go.
Now, the meeting with the Prime Minister took place at 13:30 on Saturday, the 17th of June, but I think in the event you were not asked to attend, or you didn't attend in the end.
No, no, I did. I was sat in the room outside.
Yes, but you didn't go into the meeting.
And I didn't go into the meeting.
No, and in the end, I think returned back to cover the response at Westminster Council's offices.
And someone came out of the meeting who was the person who was representing, I don't know, the Archdeacon or someone, and said to me, "Why are you here? Why isn't Nicholas or Tony here?"
Right. Well, why weren't they?
I can't answer that, only that I was asked by that Gold Command team on the Friday night to go.
Right. I mean, did you ask anybody involved in organising the meeting at Downing Street why it was that you'd been asked, but why Nicholas Holgate or Tony Redpath hadn't?
Well, it wasn't the Downing Street people, it was the people in gold who were saying I should go and not the others. I
follow. And did you ask them the same question?
I did.
And what did they tell you?
I was the best person to go in the time because I could sit and talk to people and listen, and they just said they didn't want other people to go. They didn't think it was right for them to go.
Why not?
Well, I had those conversations, but I didn't really. And I just thought they didn't think they would come across very well, or I don't know.
Now, I think you received some notes of that meeting. They are at RBK 30210098. They're not minutes, they're notes. And as you can see, they come in the form of an email from Lorna Grattan, second email down, to you on the 17th of June at 6:03 p.m. And if you look at the substance, hi Sue, in the interests of speed, below is a slightly rough and ready cut of my notes from the meeting the PM had with local residents and volunteers. And then she says, I split it into 5 sections, and those sections are split out. And if we go to page 2, 7 points down from the top, you can see there's the first few words start, people from council or coordination team. Can you see that? It's about 2/3 of the way down the first block of text. 7th bullet point down, people from council. You see that?
Oh yes, people from council.
It says people from council or coordination team to meet people as they are discharged from hospital to provide support. This is apparently not concurrently happening. Was that a problem that you were aware of during your time as Halo?
No. I don't think I was specifically aware of that specifically, no.
Right. Whose responsibility was it to know that?
People at that time, I think, again, it goes back to that original conversation, doesn't it? People didn't know where people were, so I guess some people were going to hospital and being discharged before people had even known where they were. I think so that list of where people were or what was happening to them, maybe it hadn't been coordinated by then.
Pursuing this theme, then, of helping people discharged from hospital, can we just go back, then, to the 14th of June, the Wednesday, RBK 401026, please. This is an email from Laura Johnson of RBKC Housing, second email down, 14th of June at 7:41 a.m., so early on in the incident, or early on in the day, to Robert Shaw at Housing at RBKC, copy to Amanda Gill. Rob, we shall be organising a team to send to the 2 rest centres to assess the displaced people, housing need, and arrange alternative accommodation for them. Amanda phoning around commercial hotels now to find vacancies. We are also setting up a protocol for those people in hospital who will be discharged and need to be rehoused. Well, you're in the Holland Room if you want to drop by to see what needs doing. Were you aware yourself that there was a protocol being developed on the 14th of June in relation to residents being discharged from hospital?
No, I wasn't. And I think this is, again, an indication of how siloed some of the responses, some of the work was, because that would have been a really good example of working with social care on doing those things and helping and supporting.
Right. So your criticism of there is that this was, you say siloed, so this was left to housing, but they hadn't joined up the dots with social care so that social care staff could offer their assistance.
Yes.
Yes.
It would have been more helpful to have more people who are used to hospital discharge processes there.
Were you told about this protocol when you took over the Halo role?
No.
Or even before that?
No.
No. Do you happen to know whether it was a pre-existing protocol or whether it was drafted in the wake of the incident or whether it existed at all?
I have no idea.
You don't. Let's look at Laura Johnson's first statement, RBK 3035592. There's the first page of it. Let's go to page 9, please, paragraph 37. She says, the protocol for people being discharged from hospital was organised through Adult Social Care, ASC, and Families and Children's Services, FCS. They had social workers at hospitals to liaise with the hospital and families on what housing and or support they needed when they were due to be discharged. ASC would then make this information available to housing, We would then arrange for them to be placed in hotels. Sue Redmond, Director of ASC for Triborough, took charge of this aspect with Claire Chamberlain, Triborough Director of Children's Services. Is that correct, that you took charge of this?
Not quite. I think there's two different aspects of a discharge from hospital. The first thing that we were doing was going into hospitals and helping existing people, not to do with the fire, who were in hospital and could actually be discharged home. So that's what social workers do. And they were helping to see if any people could be discharged early from hospital, therefore freeing up some beds in case the people needed them who were coming in. So that's what adult social care did in that respect.
I see.
I think the bit about them people going to hospital from the fire and then being discharged home, we send social workers there to actually help people do that. But I don't know how that fits in with Laura's earlier email about a protocol. If she's meaning adult social care protocol, well, ours was about existing people in hospitals being able to be discharged home.
I follow. Were there problems relating to the operation of the protocol between adult social care and housing?
Again, there weren't problems about us discharging existing people, but in terms of new people coming in, we did send social workers to the hospital just to be there to support, but I wasn't aware of a protocol in that respect. Hopefully they were liaising with each other, but they were doing things very differently. But the social worker was sent there to help work with the housing people on trying to help people.
Right. From your perspective, was there a system eventually put in place whereby housing and ASC liaised about what should happen to those people being discharged from hospital?
I actually don't know.
You don't know? If we go to RBK 3011588, please. This is an email also on the 17th of June, 2017, at 14:23, from Michelle Scaife at Adult Social Care Services, RBKC, to Paul Hargreaves. And she says, my understanding from a brief discussion with Amanda Johnson, Housing, this morning is that anyone who will require accommodation at the time of discharge needs to be flagged with them as soon as possible. Any information pertaining to family members that will need housing with person for discharge will also be of benefit to housing. Apparently, hospital teams are directly this information to housing or via RBKC ASC community liaisons, myself, Anne Stewart. I think it would be helpful for us all to have one directive on this, because at the moment there are a number of lists flying around and assumptions about who is doing what. Are hospitals sending information direct to housing, or is all information coming to us here at ASC and we pass it on to housing? Rob, Paul, are you able to clarify what the message is that housing is given hospitals in terms of this, or how hospital teams are currently working in terms of this matter? Now, clearly you don't get this email at this time, but what was the answer to that? Was it the case that within RBKC, from what you could see, there was confusion about how the information was to be treated?
Yes.
Yes. So this would chime with you, would it?
I think it would chime with my observation that teams, different departments, didn't really work together as was one response. They were doing things differently.
Let's go to GOL for 401155 then, please. Now, this is a long email run, but if we go to, or document run, but if we go to page 7, please, and look at item 40. I apologise. Can I go back to page 1 just to show you what this document is? This is the HASG meeting on the 17th of June 2017 at 11 o'clock at Kensington Town Hall. So this is the Saturday. It says, meeting today at 13:30 with Mary Harpley, Chair, Andrew Meek, HA Lead, Laura Johnson, Amanda Johnson, Housing. Now, of course, at this time, you're down at Downing Street waiting to be let into the room, but not being let in. So you weren't there, I assume. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. But let's see how far you can help us then. If you go to page 7, please, you can see at item 40, it says Sue Redmond, LA. Sue Redmond to update the group at the next meeting to confirm whether the families within the hospitals are receiving the appropriate social care. Now, the first thing is when you got back to Westminster from Downing Street, at some point on the 17th, Saturday the 17th of June, were you given this note or told that you had to update the group at the next meeting on this topic?
I can't remember, but I probably was. I got back in the afternoon sometime, so
Right.
I probably was.
Right.
I must have been given it.
Now you can see that you can see what's recorded. Do you remember this item?
I don't.
You don't. If we go then to RBK 30216637, this is now the 18th of June, so this is the Sunday, the next day. Here is an email from Sarah Binner, it's the second email down, to Stella Bailey, and also to Michelle Scaife copied in there, as you can see. And the subject is re-HASG meeting cancellation, Monday 19th June 2017. And Sarah Binner, I think, just to be clear, she was LBHF's provider to provide a project lead, wasn't she, for the Tri-Borough?
I have no idea.
You don't? Oh, right, okay. She provides this briefing, and if you look a little bit lower down the text of it, she says, in brief, all cases will require long-term involvement of SW. A hospital will allocate an SW, a social worker, from hospital or the complex care teams. All, in caps, communication on allocations will be sent to Natasha Bishop, leading on coordination of SW. With regards to hospitals, we will continue to discharge patients with an allocated worker or to allocate from complex care and liaise with housing. Is that right? Is that what happened?
This was the Monday, and by the Monday, we'd started to get help from elsewhere. And we'd asked for social workers from across London. And Natasha Bishop had been given the role of coordinating that support of social workers. So these things were put in action.
Right. And now, if we go to the last paragraph in this update, she says there, we need clarification from housing if patients should be sent directly to the town hall. This was the instruction on Thursday, Friday last week. Do you know why discharged patients were advised to go to the town hall rather than to the Westway Sports Centre?
I have no idea. I saw that in another email, and I had no idea why that would be.
Right. Was this, like the failure to be notified of a discharge, another breakdown in communication?
Yes. Now,
going back to and I'm sorry to dot around in terms of timing, but just seeing if we can pursue the themes. Going back to RBK 30's 21098, this is the post number 10 meeting note that we saw earlier. And if we can go to page 2, please, look at the third entry down. Third entry from the bottom of the large chunk of text, above the heading specific requests from residents. The third from bottom says council to get in touch. Do you see that?
Yes.
Council to get in touch with residents' associations and other groups with local leaders and have better comms, e.g. a large screen as at football matches. Now, we know that community groups and organisations weren't invited to HASG meetings, but the question is what efforts, if any, had been made to engage community groups in a coordinated response?
In the 2 days when...
Yes.
I know council elected members had gone out. I don't know how anyone else had gone out to talk to them. And I know people had gone to some of the rest centres, but I don't know what they've done in terms of...
Now, we know that the terms of reference for the HASG, which we looked at before, included initiating consultation with communities and individuals to ensure the response is effective. Did you think at the time that more could and should have been done to engage with communities?
Well, in terms of me and the HSG, that was the plan was going forward, and it was, as it happened in terms of the next few weeks, to really engage with local communities to make this, whatever happened in the future, something that they wanted. But that wasn't what I was doing at that time.
Right. No, but you could observe what was happening, and did you observe at the time that despite the terms of reference, including this obligation, more could have and should have been done?
I don't know whether I'm being pedantic, but in terms of the HASG, that wasn't set up for 2 days, but the day after, was it? So it should have been set up the day before, and someone should have done something about that, absolutely. But I also think before that, the HASG is supposed to do that in terms of the ongoing involvement and inclusion of people to make it really meaningful for them. There should have been something much more happening on the first morning, the first afternoon, the first day, to talk to voluntary sector anyway.
And then looking a little bit lower down the screen, under the heading, the specific requests from residents, it says council should proactively contact Clement James Centre representatives. To note, PM requested the council leader to make contact with all mosques, churches and temples by end of day Friday, when she spoke to him on Friday evening. This doesn't appear to have been done. Were you aware of this request by the Prime Minister before you received this email?
No.
Do you know whether any contact had been made before this?
I don't know.
And on being told of this, as you can see, you were indirectly directly by Lorna Grattan, if you go back to page 1. Did you contact Nicholas Holgate about it, or about any of the concerns in it?
No, this is, as you can see, this is a huge list. What I did then, because I was not leading even the Humanitarian, so I sent this huge list to Westminster, who were dealing with it, for them, and that Beck were then going to coordinate every single aspect with people to get done. I was in a specific team looking at certain things from then on.
Yeah.
This is to me because I was the representative of the meeting, so I had to pass it on to other people to do those things.
Right. Looking at the top of the email string then, following up on that answer, you forward the email that you'd got from Lorna Grattan to Robin Campbell and Julia Corky, both at WCC, but not to anybody at RBKC. Do you think you also sent it to RBKC?
At that time, I was sending everything to them. All communications, things like this, were going to the Westminster comms.
I see. Is that why we have no record, I think, of you sending this to Nicholas Holgate?
No, I just sent it straight to Westminster comms, who then dealt with everything.
Right. Once London Local Authority Gold led the response, as they did from the 16th, did you notice any difference or improvement in the level of community engagement?
I know there was a specific group set up, community engagement group, and there were conversations about community meetings, but I wasn't involved in them, but I know things were being discussed and taken forward.
Right. Were there any problems with community engagement after LLAG started to lead the response?
I think there were still problems with community engagement.
Right. What sort of problems?
Just in terms of really knowing, going out and speaking to people. I know some chief executives went out. I know, and I wasn't involved in it, but I know people went out.
Mm. Can we go to RBK 30222720? This is an email, if we go to the foot of page 1, from you on the 20th of June 2017 to Carolyn Downs at Brent, and copy to Andrew Meek at Haringey and Emma Spragg at the Red Cross. Subject, urgent support for Premier in Hammersmith. Now, the timing is 6 days after the fire and 4 days after London Gold took over the response. And if you look at the first paragraph, you say, Carolyn, the community engagement has been missing from everything. And we've been saying that from the start. And yes, everything in the support strand has got to be about what the community want and recognising what the community are already doing. I've been wanting from the start to have these conversations in the round, but we're continuing to have separate work streams that are rushing off, briefing separately, and we now need to get some coordination and principles about the community. I know why, But we have the chance as we move on now to bring some structure, some project management and some thinking to our work and put the person and the community at the heart. We can't do this from a bunker in Westminster. I know you know that, but it would be good to have a conversation with someone and with us that is more than 5 minutes long and where we listen to each other without rushing to a solution to the wrong question. Not a criticism, just a plea. I have CC in Emma from Red X, as we have had this conversation a lot. Let me know if you want us to join you. We'll see you sometime tomorrow to talk maybe after. Sue. When you say there, we've been saying this from the start, if you go back to the first page of this email run, what did you mean?
I'm just remembering this. Everyone was working separately. So when we went to Westminster, it was, as I said at the beginning, it was very structured, it was very tactical. It was very command and control. And that was needed initially. And so I was in a group looking at, I forget what it was, but it was looking at humanitarian response, some of it. And in another room and another group, there were a group of people looking at community engagement separately, strategically. And I didn't think how we could actually, we couldn't really effectively do humanitarian responses that would meet people's needs if we weren't engaged in listening to the community and understanding. And so even those requests, for instance, lots of requests about key workers or what does someone help need, we couldn't do that without actually talking to people. And I'd been in a room by that time for a week. And I just thought, and also the way I do understand these structures, but at some point you actually do need to stop and have a conversation about a bit to develop a theme rather than running. People were running with responses. That's how we were doing things. And as a consequence, we were missing key aspects of how you could really talk to communities about what would work for them better.
Did you feel at this point, 20th of June 2017, that within the London Gold-led response, coordination about how to engage and work with the community was lacking?
I don't know whether it was lacking. I just didn't know whether it was... I didn't know much about it, and it wasn't being fed into the work stream I was doing. So therefore, it was seen as a very separate... we've got to engage sort of... I don't mean politically, I mean with a small p. We've got to engage with groups just talking to groups, get groups together. What I was talking about here was really listening to people and understanding what was happening and spending more time with them. It was a bit more different, and no one was doing that, in my view.
And your role at this point was what exactly, as you understood it?
I can't remember the exact role. I was in a team that was looking at... so anything that came from... I think Caroline Downs must have been the halo at that time. So I was in a room with several people. Anything that came to her, come to us. Like, for instance, when number 10 said everyone needed a key worker, I was in a room and I had to arrange a meeting to get key workers. I then had to do a briefing for key workers. I then had to do... we were just responding to actions individually and constantly. So that's why I was saying, can we have a pause and just take stock now? Was that a week later? I don't know. Just take stock now. Just for a little bit, not in this structure of gold, but to talk properly about what we can do. That's what I was asking for there.
Yes. I just want to ask you one or two questions about social workers. In relation to those affected by the fire who already had a social worker, would it follow that they would still have had support from their pre-existing social worker throughout this disaster?
Yes.
Yes. Now, we've heard a number of references to these to the term key workers. Was that something that the government had declared should be given to victims? Everybody should have a key worker.
That was my understanding, yeah.
Right. And I think it's right, isn't it, that all key workers as such had to be social workers?
That was what was instructed, yeah.
Right, I see. So only a social worker could be a key worker as designated?
At that time.
Did that change?
I don't know whether it changed, but I'm just saying that was the instruction. Whether or not you needed social workers to do that is another point.
No, I think it's right that, is this right? Correct me if this is wrong, but the allocated caseworker would offer a wide range of practical and emotional support and, if necessary, access to specialist services.
That was the brief.
That was the brief. Was the brief followed through?
Well, I don't know whether was it the Saturday or the Sunday we asked for key workers?
Well, it was declared on the Friday, the 16th of June.
Right, well, we probably had a meeting on the Saturday with all directors across London, and we asked for them to give us names of social workers. Between that and then Sunday, in that room with some people, we then had to say what the key worker might be able to do. Again, in my view, this was just a very, very quick response. People did need to be spoken to by people. People did need help, but it could have been the housing worker who'd already supported them. So we had a whole lot of people who were offering their support, who came from outside. I mean, it doesn't matter where they came from, but they were coming, and we didn't have a load of structure in place. We didn't have a place where they could go. We didn't have someone to manage them. We didn't have. So it was beginning. So it was a process that took time.
It sounds as if the process, at its initiation, caused quite a few problems. Is that fair?
Well, it needed a lot of work.
Right. Now, there is some evidence we've had from those who had key workers that some key workers were helpful and supportive, whereas others were not. Was there a lack of clarity about the nature and scope of the key worker role?
I think at first there was, because there wasn't the management in place, there wasn't a place they could go. We haven't got a whole lot of, over the days and the weeks that followed, there was a lot of information for them. But some social workers, some people just wanted to go and say hello to people, are you okay? They didn't know they had to do all these other things, and some people didn't need them, but some people might have needed them, and those social workers who come from a totally different council hadn't been briefed properly by then. I think things like that were happening. It was all very, very quick. There may have been a different way of doing it.
Right. Mr. Chairman, it's now a convenient moment. We're going to stick with social workers for a bit, but it's probably a convenient moment.
Well, if that suits you, yes, we can have a break at that point.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like it's a good time to take the afternoon break, Ms. Redmond, so we'll break there. We'll return at 3:30, please. And again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room. All right? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Millett. 3:30 then, please. Thank you. Would you ask Ms Redmond to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Ms Redmond?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr Millett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we turn, please, to CLG 405594? This is an email from Steve Mulrooney, dated the 19th of June 2017, sent at 14:27. You're not a recipient of it, but I just want to ask you something about it. Steve Mulrooney is in housing strategy at MHCLG, or was at the time, and he says here, Katie, as of 1400, that's on the 19th of June, 65 key workers have been allocated. A further 25 to 30 TBC social workers are currently at a briefing on the key worker role for the incident. This means they are approaching the key figure of 96 key workers for Cat 1s. Could you just help? What were Cat 1s, or the key figure of 96 key workers for Cat 1s?
I don't know.
You don't know, you can't help with that. Was it the case that on Monday, the 19th of June 2017, there were Cat 1 families that had not been allocated a key worker?
I see. It was. I think it was a categorisation of people, whether they'd been bereaved, survived, or I think that was what categories were. I'm sure, I don't know these figures. He must have got these figures from the centre I was working in. I don't know whether I don't recognise the figures, but I do know that that this was the day after we'd asked for people, and not everyone had a key worker straight away.
Now, if you look on further, it says, third paragraph down, key worker allocation is waiting for and bound by process of the family liaison officers, flows being allocated to families. Once flows allocated, they are referring through to the key worker coordinator, who is then allocating key workers. Did the process where a family liaison officer had to be allocated for those residents who were bereaved place an additional delay in the allocation of a key worker?
Well, it possibly did, but it sounds like these key workers were individual social workers from every other council. And I think when we say allocated, I think they were given a name of someone who was on the list, and they were given their allocation. They were said, this is the person you need to go and see. Here's a bit of a briefing, and they might have gone. I don't think there were family liaison officers for everybody, and I think the protocol was that those families that were bereaved needed a family liaison officer before they had a key worker.
Yes, so exactly. So if you didn't have a pre-existing social worker, is it right that you couldn't get a key worker who was a social worker unless and until you had an FLO allocated to you? Yeah,
from the police.
From the police, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, if you go to RBK 30's 22845, RBK 30's 22845, this is an email to you on the 21st of June 2017. That's the Wednesday now, a week on. And it comes from Natasha Bishop at the top of the email run. And she is in Family Services at RBKC. And this comes to you, and she says, "Hi, Sue. To confirm 106 Tower and Walk residents allocated, 2/3 of these have been made contact with. We will confirm exact numbers on those who have actually been seen in person later today. A further 10 people were identified as needing allocating via the Operation DWP/Post Office Theresa May monies. These will be allocated today. Those in neighbouring streets that were displaced at present number 23, and these are being allocated. Further residents in this category being identified, so expect this number to rise during the day. We'll update you later today." Does it follow, or can we take from this document, that as of the 21st of June 2017, 7 days after the fire, of 106 residents of Grenfell Tower and the walkways. 2/3 had been contacted, but it appeared unknown how many of those were contacted face-to-face.
Yes, because we had to get reports regularly twice a day from the people who were coordinating the key workers, so that would have been her report.
Yes, I see. Do you know why the remaining third had still not been contacted?
Yes, it's because it might not have been the best process to say everyone will have a key worker within 2 days. It might not have been possible to do exactly what people thought would be happening. Originally, it was just people in the tower, and then it was everyone who was affected, so the list got longer. And the key workers were coming from everywhere, and it was very hard to get many very quickly in there who could actually do something real.
Right. Was there a process whereby people wouldn't be allocated a key worker until everybody in the tower had one?
I don't know whether that was a formal process, but we actually said people in the tower, they may be in the category 1 ones, I'm not quite sure.
Right,
but I think that would make sense.
Right. And why were those who had been displaced in neighbouring areas but still needing support, why did they have to await the allocation of a key worker?
Originally, this might not be the process that anyone would have advocated to do this work, by the way. I just need to put that down. Originally, we actually went out to ask for X number of social workers to cover the families that were affected in the tower. That's what was said. But then lots of people came forward who were affected, who had relatives, and so more and more people needed support, whether or not everyone, needed an allocation of a key worker or not. But then the numbers got bigger, and so we had to look at other social workers, and we had to start saying who needed them first, and it was those people who were affected mostly first. There had to be some sort of categorisation in some ways,
right,
which came from gold.
Once key workers were allocated to families, can you tell us how long it took in general for face-to-face contact to take place with the relevant families or person?
I forget in terms of the briefing, because of course this is being done, the briefings are being done on very quickly, and protocols are being drawn up very quickly. And I think the process was, please get in touch with your person straight away by phone or face-to-face. In retrospect, and some people didn't want to see, they actually didn't want to see a key worker at that stage. Some people were seeing housing workers, so they didn't know what a key worker was. Some people weren't at the addresses that the key worker had. There was lots of operational reasons why some people might not have seen face-to-face in that day.
And let's go to RBK 15243. This is an email from Mona Hyatt on Thursday, June the 22nd, 2017. So we're outside the 7-day period after the fire, but it looks back. And the subject is, as you can see, the third entry down, suicidal ideation amongst Grenfell residents. Dear Debbie, Tim and Natasha, that's Natasha Bishop, rather, and if you look down, please, at page 2 of this document, you can see that it follows on from an email the previous day, on the 21st of June, from Mona Hyatt. Same title. Dear Craig, a situation happened at the Westway site this afternoon. A patient was restrained until 999 service arrived. Our community champions are reporting patients who are threatening to kill themselves, and there are reports of suicide attempts. The disquiet is due to people calling the helplines or speaking to social workers who are arranging appointments for a week's time. I completely appreciate the real stretch on services at the moment. However, it's apparent people need to be seen a lot sooner. I'm aware that this is building within the local community, and I think it would be helpful for us to support you by distributing comms amongst community leaders that provide some assurance that people will be given appointments as a matter of urgency. And she signs herself off. Mona Hyatt, Director of Programmes, NHS West London Clinical Commissioning Group. Was this problem averted to here by Mona Hyatt something you were aware of at the time, and I say at the time, on or around the 21st of June 2017?
I can't remember this example, but I do know not everyone was getting a key worker ringing them.
Right. Now let's go then on to RBK 3016140. This is an email from RBKC, Rachel Dalton, on the 23rd of June 2017, to the Beck, copied to RBKC housing staff regarding feedback from residents who'd been placed at the Holiday Inn in Kensington. And in the fourth paragraph down on your screen, she says this, and this is about Jenny, who'd been coordinating the Holiday Inn Kensington Forum. She says she has advised that residents have reported and are angry that they have yet to see anyone at all from the council, despite my understanding that all Grenfell residents had been allocated an SW, social worker, and had completed suitability assessments. Perhaps these are households from the cordoned area? Query. She stated that because the staff that have been drafted in from elsewhere, the impression is that residents feel they've been abandoned by RBKC, despite them being present since last Wednesday at the rest centres and making contact with clients, etc. It is our officer's observations that the majority of residents have been satisfied with the response and assistance of RBKC, but that a number of volunteers, about whom safeguarding concerns were raised this week, were present at the hotel and antagonising, escalating the feeling of residents, calling the media and calling lawyers, etc. First, were you aware that residents felt abandoned by RBKC by virtue of the fact that they were having to deal with workers from outside the borough?
I'm sure people might have done, yeah.
Was that a problem that was brought to your attention at the time?
It might have been, but Theresa May had said anyone had to have a key worker, and there weren't enough key work, and a key worker had to be a social worker. My view was, I don't think they needed to be a social worker, and they could have been anyone from RBKC who had empathy and could understand and talk to people. Had that happened, or Westminster, or Hammersmith and Fulham, they would have had local people who would have seen them, and they would have been coordinated better. That is my impression. Right. This was because lots of people were coming from different places, they were just visiting from outside, and they didn't know the area, and people didn't feel they were from RBKC, and they weren't.
Right. Right. Looking at the officer's observations in the last paragraph, that a number of volunteers had been attending the Holiday Inn in Kensington and antagonising or escalating the feeling of residents, etc. Was that something you were aware of at the time or knew anything about?
Yes, that had come through the group, the team I was in terms of safeguarding concerns about some people who were trying to not quite escalate, but they had different views of whether those residents should speak to a key worker at all. Don't speak to them. There was some people were saying that. That's what some reports we got.
Right. And where were those volunteers from? Were they from organisations, or were they just people who had put their hands
I think they were individuals.
Right, I see. Now, I want to ask you about walkway residents. Do you remember what was London local authority Gold's process for allocating key workers to the families of the walkways, by which I mean the buildings within the Grenfell area, but were not the tower?
I can't remember in detail, but I do know there were conversations. It might have been that's when the numbers of people who needed key workers increased. I can't remember in detail.
Were families from the walkways prioritised in the same way that Grenfell Tower residents were?
I think originally, in all these things, there was a categorisation done of who people might have had to have key workers, and in the first instance, it was those in the tower. Right. It wasn't meaning other people wouldn't get support or help, but in terms of the key worker specifically.
Yes, and when did that change, so that everybody was treated equally? Or did it?
I can't even remember whether it did change, but I do know more people were allocated key workers, and I can't remember when.
Right. Then let's go back to GOL 401742. I say back, I think this is the first time we've seen this document. This is a minute, or a note perhaps, of the HAC subgroup, Community Assistance Centre and Helpline subgroup, Andrew Meek, Beverly Tarker. And we know that it's dated the 19th of June. If we go to page 2, penultimate entry, we can see there that Beverly Tarker, who was Haringey, I think, and Gold Command key worker subgroup leader, she suggests here to Andrew Meek that she heads up CORE, you see that, and Sue CORE Tower, and Sue to look at the support for other locally affected. Were there separate work streams for Grenfell Tower residents and the Walkway residents?
No, not separate work streams, but in terms of humanitarian assistance, there are categories of people who might be affected. It's in the framework, I think.
Right.
And those people who are survivors or bereaved or involved immediately, there's a categorisation. Then people who are affected because they were in locally or they saw. There is a categorisation in terms of responses.
Did that categorisation lead to different provisions of support for Grenfell Tower residents and the Walkway residents, respectively?
In relation to this, I can't remember what happened. I think this is why we had to get a lot more key workers, because there were a lot more people who needed support. They might not have all wanted key workers, but because there was a decree that everyone would have a key worker, everyone who was affected wanted one, absolutely. If they wanted one, they should have had one. And I think that's why we had to get more key workers, and I can't remember the work stream from here.
Right. And let's see if we can pick this up earlier on in this note. If we go to the foot of page 1, please. You see there underneath the phrase identified 5 strands, and then it says in the second bullet point, for those different cohorts, what's the level of support we are providing / offer to them? Is that a reference to different levels of support being given to different groups of people, depending on whether they were in the tower or from the walkways?
Yes, and I think this is absolutely part of a framework.
Right.
A national framework that do that.
And if you look back at page 2 again, you can see under the red reference to Nick Pendry, clinical lead, it says government offer is only for people in the tower, 96 families, 86 from Grenfell Tower and 10 from Grenfell Walk. What was that about? Do you know?
I think that's saying that's all that maybe they meant at the time when people should have key workers.
Right. Was it the case that there was a lack of available key workers which left certain displaced residents without one?
I'm sure that we did have lots of key workers. I'm sure some people either didn't see them because they didn't do or they didn't deliver what they wanted.
And who was in? Sorry.
I'm not quite sure how many didn't actually have one allocated in this cohort.
Right. And who was in charge of the allocation system?
There was a group which Beverly and myself and a few people sat on in Westminster. I guess it was the Halo at the time, but we managed the group that were getting the allocations, the system together, and then we set up. I think it was Natasha Bishop's name was mentioned. She was the social worker leader who was then managing how they were operated and what happened to them. But Beverly and I and a few other people there were actually getting the names and some of the people were allocating them to people who needed them.
And were you liaising with housing? RBKC Housing?
Yes, we were. We definitely felt, because some people already, in terms of allocating key workers to people who already had a housing person supporting them, there was a question, well, should we do that? They're already seeing housing people, they're providing support, they've got to know them. But we had to give them a key worker as well. That's what we were.
I see. During your time working on the response, first as Halo, then after the Pan London response was activated, did you have any experience of support being provided from central government?
I don't think I did.
Right. Now, we've had the benefit of your comments and opinions on the London, excuse me, and your comments and opinions on the London Gold activation and a number of specific elements of the response. I just want to ask you about the adequacy of that response and the feedback. If we go to RBK 3044673, what I'm showing you is a document entitled Adult Social Care Staff Debrief Sessions Feedback Report. Now, this was produced by Jeff Sherlock on the 14th of July 2017. Have you, or did you see this document at the time?
I think I did, because we asked someone to come in and talk to us. We wanted a debrief, so we got someone independent in to do it. In adult social care, it was just us doing it.
Right. Did you have any input into this document?
No, it was just asking all the staff. I wasn't. I don't think I was asked staff. I don't think so. I can't remember.
Okay, let's see if this prompts a recollection. Can we go to page 2, please, and look at the second bullet point down on page 2, coordination. I'll show it to you. It says coordination between police, voluntary agencies, etc. was said to be poor, and the flow of information and understanding of each other's roles was felt to be fragmented. One group described how they had been managing the Westway Centre when a group from a different borough arrived and took over, quotes unquotes, making it clear that they were now, quotes, in charge, unquotes. A consistent comment was that the lack of coordination led to people having to repeat their information several times. Now, what I've read to you there were these observations that you shared, you agreed with?
Well, these were observations of the people on the ground, and I understand what they mean by they were taken over. I understand what happened there, but they might not have been aware of what was happening there.
Right.
And obviously the coordination wasn't good. We've discussed that most of the day.
Can we go to page 3 then and look at the third paragraph? That's emergency contingency plans there, next to the bullet point. And it says, emergency contingency plans and the lack of them was raised by all groups spoken to. It was generally felt that there was no clear plan in place, which led to much of the confusion and lack of coordination. This was particularly referred to as being the major issue in the initial stages. It was, however, the view that as time passed, this improved, and there now seemed to be more consistency. Was it the case that there were plans but very limited knowledge of their existence among the staff who were meant to apply them, from what you observed?
Yes. I subsequently know that some of the plans weren't complete, but yes, there were plans.
And immediately underneath that it says the key worker role was the subject of a great deal of discussion, and the lack of clarity of the purpose of the role was a major topic. People felt that the expectations placed on them were unrealistic, in that they were expected to deal with everything and find a solution to every issue raised. Is that an observation with which you would agree?
It is.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. Well, Ms. Redmond, I should tell you I've come to the end of my prepared questions. I'm going to ask the chairman to do what we normally do, which is to take a short pause at this stage to see whether there's anything I've overlooked or other questions that others would wish me to ask. And so if we can take the normal break that we normally do now, that would be very helpful,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Millett. Well, as you probably know, Ms. Redmond, at this stage in the proceedings, we have a short break to enable Mr. Millett to check that he's not left anything out, and also to allow others who are following the proceedings from elsewhere to suggest questions that perhaps we ought to have asked you. So we'll stop now. Do you think 10 minutes is long enough, Mr. Millett?
I'm just looking at my emails.
Well, we could
Yes,
say,
I think so. I think 10 minutes, but if I need longer, I can come and ask.
yes. I think we'll say 4:05, and if it goes a bit longer, well, someone can tell you.
Okay.
And again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room. All right?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll say 4:05, Mr. Millett. If you need longer, just ask the usher to come and tell us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, would you ask Mr. Redmond to come back in, please? Right, Mr. Redmond. Well, we'll see if there are any more questions for you. All right. Thank you. Yes, Mr.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just one or two. First, could you please be shown GOL 401742 again, please? Now, we looked at this before. This is the note of an HAC subgroup, Community Assistance Centre and Helpline subgroup. If you look at the 5 strands at the foot of page 1 and go over to the top of page 2, you can see the third bullet point down refers to an equalities impact assessment, and it says equalities impact assessment needs to be done on this, but not desperately urgent. Do you recall whether that was ever done, whether an equalities impact assessment was ever done?
I can't remember.
Right. Do you know, or do you remember from what you saw, whether those involved in the humanitarian side of the response to the Grenfell Tower fire were consciously aware of, from what they said or what they did, as far as you could tell, of the obligations of RBKC under the public sector equality duty under the Equality Act?
I'm finding that difficult to answer. I know that people expressed issues around interpreters and food and times of prayers and opportunities for people for that. So they were taking those things into account in some of the responses.
Yes. Could I reformulate my question slightly more pointedly, perhaps? Was there any discussion at the time about the discharge of that duty from what you saw?
No.
No. Now, we talked about key workers and allocation. Where key workers were allocated to families with children, did those key workers have ready access to the CCS, the Children's Services?
My recollection was in the main, RBKC Children's Services tried to be the key workers for those families with children. So most of them hopefully did have local RBKC social workers.
Right. Were you aware of any instances where key workers were allocated to families who did not have ready access to child support services?
I'm not aware of individually. There may have been.
Right. Now, finally, Mr. Redmond, is there anything else that you'd like to add to your evidence by way of observations or anything you'd like to say in addition to what you've told us today?
Well, I suppose the thing for me is just about lessons learned, and I know you've got hundreds of lessons that are learned, but in councils, one of the main things you hear, and I've been to lots of councils and senior levels, and it's always said children and adult services are the most important because that's people, and people can need support and can die. After this experience, I just think the status and the awareness of the emergency planning system in councils is not as it should be, and it needs to be absolutely up there. They need to be inspected. They need to be a person who's really accountable at a really senior, and the corporate team have to get training that I've never experienced training that you needed to do anything like this. I think that needs to be changed totally. I think if you're going to always have the Director of Adult Social Care as a halo, they need to be trained specifically in what that is, in the breadth of it, rather than just, and I would question why you need that person to do it. I think gold should go in immediately. Whatever you mean by gold, I think experts should go in immediately something happens and not sit there and wait, and support a council from the start.
Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Redmond, it only remains for me to thank you very much for coming here today to the inquiry and assisting us with our investigations. We're extremely grateful to you. That's all I have for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Redmond is right that I should add my thanks on behalf of all of us on the panel to you for coming along today to give your evidence. It's been very interesting to hear what you have to tell us and very helpful. So we're grateful to you for coming. And now you're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Millett, that I think must be it for today, but
Yes.
we have another witness tomorrow.
We have another witness tomorrow, Laura Johnson, with whom I think you'll be familiar, and Mr. Keating is going to adduce her evidence.
Good. Thank you very much. Well, then we'll break at that point and we'll resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.